This video we're going to talk about cooking ribs. That's some of people's favorite barbecue, is cooking ribs, and eating them is a lot of fun, and they're pretty difficult when it comes down to looking at all the different products you can smoke. Ribs are probably the hardest, but you can have a lot of success with them your very first time, just like everything else. In this video, we're going to stick to the fundamentals. We're going to cook a baby back rack or loin back, same thing. We're going to cook a spare rib rack also, and we'll cook some Braunschweiger at the same time. We will go ahead and break that spare rib rack down into something called St. Louis ribs so that you can see the difference. That's basically the three types of ribs you can get from a hog: baby back ribs, a full spare rib rack, or a St. Louis rack. So I'll show you the differences in those, and we'll cook all of them. We're going to cook them on a little offset smoker. So this is a rack of baby back or loin back ribs. I got these at Walmart. I did not go to my butcher for this video. I wanted to go to Walmart and get meats that you might be able to find anywhere in America at any grocery store. So we're just getting prepackaged. These are Tyson. Baby back ribs come pretty much ready to go. I do like to peel that membrane right there off the very back. It makes it, I think, more tender. There's some controversy over that among barbecuers, but I like to do it because it's pretty easy. So I take a butter knife and very gently kind of work it apart there so I can get a purchase on it with my fingers. And I use a paper towel to grip it because it's very slippery. But you can see how tough and tenuous it is. I like to pull it off there. Take your time with this, and don't get frustrated if the first rack you do, it's difficult. It doesn't always go this smoothly. Sometimes it's a real bear because it tears, especially if from the packer there are slices in it where their knife has hit it, and it kind of comes apart. But generally this is the way it works. You grab it with a paper towel and it pulls apart in one big piece. I like to start in the middle like that and then just pull each side. And now you can see the meat and the fat, and there's no membrane there. I think you get better dry rub adhesion, better smoke penetration. You can see that's tough as rope. I don't think it's good to eat, so we'll discard it. And now this rack is pretty much ready. I'll, of course, trim any, I'm checking for little bone pieces there. I'll trim off any small pieces that are going to burn up. There on the right side, there's a really thin piece. I'll knock that off. Otherwise, the baby back rack is kind of ready to go. See, there's some tenons up there. You can cut those off. You don't have to. That little silver skin underneath there. It's easy enough to do. But don't kill yourself on this going crazy. Most of that will render down just fine. But I'm taking them off just as an example in this video. So that is our baby back or loin back rib cut. If you remember this image, this is a hog, and the head would be up here and the tail would be here. If you look at these ribs right here, you see the sternum, and then you see the ribs that come down and attach to that sternum. The spare rib rack comes from right here on over on this lower portion. So there's some belly meat on there, and then there's a sternum. The baby back rack comes from right up here where the loin muscle lies. So if you draw a line from here to here, the baby back racks are up here and the spare ribs are down there. They have a little bit different flavor, not much. Consistency more than anything. There's more lean meat on the baby back. So the lean to like moist mouthfeel difference ratio is different for sure. I prefer spare rib over baby backs, but it's pretty close. So this is a rack, spare rib rack, and you can see the baby backs would sit right up there on the top of the hog. Now this is the flap of skin that's on the inside of the cavity. Its analog in a cow or in beef is skirt steak. So I take that off. In a hog, it's so thin that, and there's tough membrane on either side. I go ahead and trim it. But you can see right up here is the sternum that we showed in that image earlier, and this is the belly meat back here. So I take that flap off. That's basically the diaphragm between the back organs in a hog and the front thoracic organs, like the heart and the lungs. And that just cleans it up. I don't like it on there. And of course I do remove the membrane. Same method. Use a paper towel to get a purchase and pull it on off there. So this is the full spare rack. Right here, as you can see, there's the rib tip up top, and then there's the St. Louis rack down here. The St. Louis rack is basically just a spare rib rack with the rib tips removed, which I'll do for you now. See, that's the belly meat. There's no ribs in there. And the sternum is on the left side. You can see it angled across here. And so you find the longest rib, which is usually the third or fourth one, find the top of it, and then you just cut a line all the way across there. And you're left with a rib tip on top. And at the bottom, you're left with your St. Louis rack. You can buy St. Louis racks in the supermarket or the butcher. That's why I wanted to show you where they come from, because so people see that and maybe don't know if it's a different part of the hog or not. But basically, it's just the bone portion of the spare rib. There's this little point over here where the ribs kind of diminish, and there's some of that belly meat left. I always chop that off and square it off too. So you're left from a full spare rib rack with three parts. You have the rib tips up top, you have the St. Louis rack in the middle, and you have that little point down there we cut off, which I discard. Today we're cooking in an Oklahoma Joe's porch model offset. This is one I've renovated. And we're going to start it with charcoal and finish it the rest of the way with pecan and oak wood. Just figured I'd show you a different smoker method this time. I like to put chunks of wood up on top when I light the charcoal because we get them burning, get that lignin breaking down like we want it to. And then, of course, clean the grates every time. I use a nylon bristle brush instead of a metal one. Spray it down with oil, polish it off with a paper towel. I know how much charcoal and wood it takes to get a 225 to 250 fire. For me, that's it. That's kind of what you'll have to figure out on yours, but it shouldn't differentiate that much. And we're going to start, like I said, with charcoal and wood here, but we're going to only add wood from here on out. I'm only cooking over wood today. So I've dry rubbed the baby back and the rib tip down the lower left, you can see, and I'm going to dry rub this St. Louis rack. The dry rub I'm using is the exact same bottle of dry rub that we made in that How to Make Dry Rubs video. It's that simple, basic dry rub that I showed you guys. Basically, I just kind of coat the top and pat it in, and then coat the back and pat it down. Get some good adhesion. We are cooking some Braunschweiger today, which is that liver sausage I've told you about. Liver sausage sounds terrible, I know, but it's actually pretty mild. If you've ever had pate, that's about how strong it is. It's very mild, and when you smoke it, it gets really good. It's about the consistency of bologna, but it's made with liver in it in part also. I like it. I like it a lot. Marie, if you're watching this video, part of this Braunschweiger is coming to you. And I do like to dry rub it first. It doesn't take very long to cook. It's, of course, a pre-cooked product, but man, it goes great when, with a dry rub and some smoke. It just really kicks it up a notch. You can spread it on crackers, or you can make a sandwich out of it, or you can eat it plain. It's a great product. So there we go. We're all dry rubbed. I don't mind dry rubbing right before I put them on the fire. Some people like to dry brine them for several hours or overnight by letting that sit in the refrigerator like that. I don't notice a measurable difference, so I often do not do that. And now we just wait for our smoker to come up to temperature. And it's time to add the products. We'll put the racks of ribs on the left over there and the rib tips. And then we'll put the Braunschweiger on the right because we're going to take it off pretty fast anyway. We're going to leave it on there about an hour is all. And as I said earlier, we'll be cooking over a fire that's at a temperature of 225 to 250 degrees. It's kind of the sweet spot for me. That's where I've designed all my internal temperatures and times and everything, kind of around that time or that temperature. So about an hour later, we'll check this, and there'll be two things that happen at this hour mark. One is that the Braunschweiger is done, and two, you'll see that the ribs are starting to take some color on. But the crust has not set on those ribs yet, so we will not spray yet. Remember, we don't spray our product at all with any wet mop or anything until that crust is set. It's only been an hour. And Braunschweiger's done. But if I were to run my fingernail across the back of those ribs, that seasoning would come off. So it's not ready for a spray. So we'll wait about another half hour. Generally, it's about an hour and a half before crust sets and the bark is ready for a spray or a wet mop. So we're at an hour and a half now. You can see it's starting to get a little more brown from the red color earlier as those oils from the smoke are starting to collect on there. I'm spraying today with my own marinade that I manufacture. I like the color that it gives ribs. It darkens them up quite a bit, but you can use water, you can use apple cider vinegar, you can use apple juice, a mixture of any of those. You can use Coca-Cola or Dr. Pepper. There's all kinds of stuff people use for this. I would not recommend using like a heavy sauce, like a barbecue sauce. It would get piled up on there and probably get pretty bitter from all the smoke that would attach and get in there. It kind of gets sludgy. A couple more pieces of wood in there. That's all it takes to keep this guy going. This is another hour later, so we're going to spray it again. I spray about every hour. This just keeps it from burning up. And then generally we take them off and put them in a braise at about 3 hours. That's where we are here. That bark is really looking good. Our ribs are about halfway cooked. You see the tongs don't scrape it off there anymore. The bark is set really well. Got the color we want. We got the smoke flavor we want. Dry rib is set really well. So we're done with the smoking part of this. We're going to go wrap them in foil and braise them. And I'm not going to braise them in the oven today. I'm going to do the whole thing in the smoker. Again, just to show you kind of a different method. You could easily finish these in the oven. And just like we did with the brisket, we're going to double wrap them in heavy-duty aluminum foil. So there's 3 racks. We'll take 6 pieces of foil. Now I like to put a good sweet barbecue sauce down. This is my own. Any barbecue sauce will work. You want to make sure the sugar content is here, though. We have a good, bitter, smoky pork product, and it does, in my opinion, need to be offset with something sweet. You can use honey at this point, maple syrup, brown sugar, a sweet barbecue sauce like I'm using, but I would recommend getting some sweetness onto your product at this point. So I put some barbecue sauce on each side, just a little bit. It's all going to mix with the juices anyway in this braise pouch, so you don't need to coat them completely. And I'm going to stick a probe thermometer in the deepest part of the thickest rib, just so I can kind of keep an eye on my internal temperature and know when it's about time to start testing them for tenderness, which was usually about anywhere over 200 to 205 degrees. Then I can open that pouch later, and with a probe or a bamboo skewer or a toothpick, I can test the tenderness. But this will kind of give me something to monitor. I generally do this. So double wrap them nice and tight. And we will start the braise. Just like everything, there's the smoke, the braise, and the rest. We will add maybe one step to this, which is the glaze. I do like to glaze ribs. I like to glaze chicken. So we'll show you that step too. But the 3 fundamental steps are still the same. Smoke, braise, and rest. All right, so back on the smoker these go. And it'll be anywhere between an hour and a half and 2 more hours, depending on the thickness of your ribs, depending on what temperature you keep your smoker at, and how consistent you keep it. But that's why I put the probe thermometer in there. When it hits 200 degrees in that thickest rack of ribs in the center, I know they're all going to be starting to get tender, and I can start testing them. Because you kind of got to test a rib to see when it's done. Open that pouch and stick it with a skewer, like I said earlier, and see when it's nice and soft. These are at 115 degrees, about halfway. So now we just watch our temperature. I am going to reheat some baked beans. If you watched one of my other videos on how to make what I consider the best baked beans in the world, there they are. And I make them in these, after I make them, I put them in these loaf pans and freeze them. So I can pull them out anytime I'm cooking and throw them on the smoker. I put some saran wrap on there that needs to be removed to keep them from getting any freezer burn. So we'll throw them on there too and let them reheat. no problem. All right, so after it hits 200 degrees, I'm going to pull them off there and use this probe thermometer to test for tenderness. It's raining cats and dogs out there. I had to pull my smoker up onto the porch. And these are perfect. This is the baby back rack, and it's measuring, I think it measured 205 degrees, and just nice and soft as butter. It's done. So when they're done, we'll take them all off like this, and before we rest them, I want to put some sauce on these guys. So that's the other step I talked about with ribs earlier that I think you should do, is put some more of that sweet sauce, whatever you're using. Make sure it's good and sweet when you're doing a glazed rib like this. And that sugar will offset any of that bitter smoke, and which is good, but it needs an offset in my opinion. I think it needs some sweet complementary sauce on there. So I brush sauce on both sides of all these, and we'll put them back on the smoker at the same temperature for 15 or 20 minutes and let that sauce get nice and tacky. And there they're ready to shut down for 15 more minutes and get nice and tacky on there, and then we'll slice these guys up. After they rest, of course. So I like to rest them in a pan with foil on top, and before I do that, here's another secret. If you spray them down with, I can't believe it's not butter spray, or you can brush some melted margarine on there. I prefer this though. This really takes it up a notch. This adds a real rich flavor to ribs. Almost everyone I know does this in competition when they do competing. I also do this on chicken. This adds a great, like I said, richness to it. And these ribs are piping hot, so we don't want to cut them up just yet. We'll cover them with foil and let them sit 15 or 20 minutes at least and rest. All right, so we'll cut these up now and see our end product. This is that rack of baby back ribs. I like to flip them upside down so I can see the bones better. And then I put my thumb and finger on the bone so I can know where it is, and then I cut. It's never straight across. You'll run into a bone if you cut them straight across. And these look great. That smoke ring actually goes all the way through on these. It often does on ribs. So we'll slice these guys up. Those came out great. And then here's our St. Louis rack of the spare rib. Again, I'll flip them upside down so that I can see where the bones are, and then using my thumb and forefinger on the ends of the rib, I can feel where they are, and then you know where the meat is in between. Otherwise, it's not too intuitive. You'll cut into a bone every time if you don't, I do anyway, if you don't feel kind of where they are. These came out wonderfully also. Good smoke ring, great bark, and they're perfectly done in my opinion. And then here's that rib tip. I generally just chunk it up into pieces. There's a lot to eat between there. There's pieces of cartilage and that sternum and some bones and stuff in there. But there you have it. Today we cooked a spare rib rack cut into St. Louis rack and its rib tip, and we cooked a baby back rack, and we cooked some Braunschweiger, and these are those beans. The Braunschweiger's in the bottom right there. So that's what it comes out like. Ribs are, in my opinion, the most difficult thing to cook, but that doesn't mean it's like really hard. You just have to practice a little bit. There is a smoke, there's a braise, and then there's a rest, but there's also the glaze in there that I think is really important. You can actually do that after they're rested also, but I prefer to go ahead and do it before the rest. And then you can keep them in foil like that until your friends get there, or if you're having a party or whatever, and they hold quite a while. In my opinion, they don't hold to the next day as well as something like a brisket or a pork shoulder or something like that does. Ribs I think should be eaten the same day. you can also cook the whole spare rib rack at once. You don't have to cut it into a St. Louis and rib tip like that. So please try this method. I hope this video wasn't too exhaustive and too long, and I hope you learned something. So thanks for watching.